Hi folks, and welcome today to the back of my allotment plot. I have here a little kind of mini orchard area. There's a couple of fruit trees, and because of the shade that they cast, it makes it very difficult to use the land underneath productively to grow vegetables. And for a long time I've had it in the back of my mind that it would be a really nice project to try and convert this into something like a wildflower area or a wildflower meadow. And today I'm going to start that journey, and I'm very, very excited because, like I say, I've wanted to do this for a really long time, and hopefully it's going to be the first part in a series of videos talking about how I've done this, at charting the progress, the successes and the failures. I really hope you enjoy. So how on earth am I going to go about turning this area of grassland into a nice wildflower rich area? There's a number of different ways that you can do this, and we're going to be focusing today a lot on nutrient content because that is what is going to kind of define what happens above the ground. It's all about how much nutrient is in the soil. And if you want a really quick result, you can kind of turn this over, maybe churn it up a little bit, scarify it, and then sow some kind of cornflower mixes because those wildflowers are quite well adapted to high nutrient environments. And you'll probably get quite a nice showing in spring, but over time, well, quite quickly in fact, the grasses will probably start to dominate that sward and you'll then have to come in, scarify it again, and it's not a very sustainable approach. I'm going to be trying to create a much lower nutrient environment, something more akin to a traditional hay meadow. In the old days, before the advent of widespread agricultural fertilizer use, hay meadows were kind of cut on a rotation every year and they get roughly the same harvest, but it was nowhere near as much as you could get with the advent of agricultural fertilizer. And those old hay meadows used to have a massive abundance, a massive richness of different wildflower species. So what I'm going to be doing is using an amazing plant called Yellow Rattle. Now this plant is incredible, and it is also very, very difficult to get this to germinate. So I've got some plug plants here which are quite difficult to get a hold of. Sometimes you have to order in advance. I was really lucky, these just came in stock. I'll leave a link to the website where I got them in the description. And the reason this plant is so incredible and such a kind of keystone for species rich grassland is that it is a hemiparasite. So the yellow rattle, it still needs light to photosynthesize, but it will tap into the roots of grasses and take some of their nutrients and reduce their vigor. That means that there is more space for your other plants to essentially grow and thrive. One thing that's really important to do before you get the mower out is have a good look at what you've got at the moment, record some of the species, try and figure out how many different grasses you've got, what common weeds have you got, you know, and are they really weeds or are they wildflowers like dandelions or hawksbeard? I have absolutely loads of hawksbeard in here, plantain, 4 different types of grasses. There's a grostis, cocksfoot or orchard grass, perennial ryegrass, which you get everywhere, maybe some couch grass, and it's just a really good idea to have a good record of what you had right at the very start because this can be quite a slow process. It's nice to see these things change over time. So a few things to mention about yellow rattle. You can get yellow rattle established using yellow rattle seed, but it's very difficult, and it's very difficult for 2 main reasons. The first is that the seed has to be very, very fresh. It does not keep well. And the second is that the seeds need to undergo a period of cold stratification in order for them to actually germinate. They need to be on the ground for about 4 months in that cold period. You can potentially try and mimic that in the fridge, but it's not going to be as easy as getting these plug plants, which, you know, I've definitely cheated a bit doing this. But the other thing to note is that yellow rattle is an annual. So these plants will die off. You want to be getting them in the ground as soon as possible. And maybe a little bit late. It's late May here, and these could have done with going in a little bit earlier. The earlier that they go in, the more chance they have for their root systems to establish, to find other grasses to start parasitizing, and you'll get a bigger plant, more flowers, and more seed. It's all about getting as much seed on the ground here as possible. When it comes to actually planting them out, they don't really have any special requirements, but they do need a lot of light. So I am going to go through with the mower first and give this area a really good mow, remove the grass clippings. I've been doing that for a year already, I should mention, for the best part of 2 years. So I have already slowly started to strip nutrients from this soil. But you can do this with a kind of a lawn that you're treating as brand new as well. So let's get these in the ground. We've got the sward mown nice and tight, which means there's going to be plenty of space and light for these little plug plants to hopefully thrive. thrive in their new home. And what I'm going to do is go around and mark out the spacing ahead of time, because I don't want to start putting them in the ground and then realise that I've not got enough to cover the area at the density that I want. I want to get these as close to around 50 centimetres together as possible. That's kind of the maximum density that's recommended by the growers, the plug plant growers. And I might not be able to get them that close. I would rather have them spread out a little bit more and cover different parts of the plot, because they're going to be a little more resilient that way. If they're all concentrated in one part of the plot that it turns out that they don't like or they don't survive in, then it's much better to have them spread out over a wider area, but I'll try and keep them as close to 50 centimetres as possible. And I'm quite glad I did this process of marking out ahead of time, because actually I've got about 17 plants here, 17 plugs, and they don't go as far as I was expecting them to. So I was going to have a double line down here and then extend it further out back, but I would have run out of plants around here. So what I'm going to have is a single line down the middle and then expand out more as I get to this back patch, and hopefully the plants will spread out. And this should make it a little easier for me to see where they are and how they're growing as well. It'll also make it easier to mow around them, because the plants are fairly resilient. If you clip them with the mower, it's fine, they should grow back. But if I can avoid doing that, I will, because that should mean a healthier plant and more seed on the floor. Let's get some of them planted up. Here I'm just popping in the last plug. You can see these are a little root bound. I think it would have been good to plant these on a little earlier, but nothing special. Just pop it in the ground. And one thing I am doing is making sure that there is grass nearby. If I've got a particularly patchy part like this, then I've made sure that I've got a grass clump here that the roots can start latching into, because otherwise the plant, although it can survive for a little while without leaching from grass species, it really is crucial. For example, if you try and germinate the seeds in just some compost, they might sprout, but they will not last very long at all, which is why you might have noticed all of these little plugs also come with some grass. The plug plants are now all planted out, they're in the ground, and this one in particular is extremely beautiful. It is a lovely little flower, kind of rough looking leaves, but the actual yellow flower itself is so cool. And how I get on the allotment is just amazing. This is something I'm used to seeing in nature reserves, so having it so close to home is really, really cool. But how do we manage this into the future? Well, you can see I've laid out these bamboo canes, and you don't have to do this, but I'm quite a forgetful person, and I can really see myself just coming through here with the lawnmower one day, just completely forgetting that this yellow rattle is here and obliterating it all. So I've marked out most of the plants just to remind myself where they are, to not tread on them. And what I'm going to do is just give them a bit of TLC this first year. I'm going to come in with the mower and just make sure that the grass isn't getting really tall and out-competing the plants, to just give these guys the best chance to establish. I'm not sure how much bigger they'll grow or what they're really going to do. It's a bit of an experiment, but that is definitely part of the fun. The objective is to get these guys to the end of summer, to get them to flower much more and to set good, healthy amount of seed. And when these guys do get to the end of their season and they've set their seed, it's really cool. The seed stays in the seed head and you can give it a shake and the seeds rattle around, which is where it gets its name. Really, really cool. And there's a few ways that you can try and spread the seed. I think I will probably be going around manually and harvesting, just because it will be nice to record that process. And also it gives me a bit more certainty that the seed is being spread where I want it. You can just leave it and hopefully the seeds will fall naturally, but you're gonna wanna come in at the end of summer and give this whole lot a mow anyway. And what you can do if you mow the yellow rattle plants, because they're gonna die off in winter anyway, you can then kind of rake all the arisings around, spread it all around the wildflower area, and hopefully those seeds will fall through and be spread around, and then you can come and pick up all the arisings about a week later once it's dried out a little bit as well. And then into the future, hopefully come spring, you will start to see the first little yellow rattle germinating, and we'll have to be out on the lookout for that. The most difficult part of this process is just having a bit of patience, and then when it gets into next year, after spring, that's when we get more into the detail of how we want to be managing the sward. When do we want to be cutting? How are we going to let the yellow rattle flower and come to seed? If we cut too early, we might stop that. If we cut too late, it might just be before it sets seed, so we'll need to consider some of that stuff. But for now, these are in. I really hope you've enjoyed or found this interesting. Maybe it's an introduction to Yellow Rattle. If you've ever tried anything like this before, improving the biodiversity of a grassland, please do let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you've ever used Yellow Rattle or had success germinating it or failed to germinate it, because I know I certainly have. Thank you ever so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again in the next part.